Hello you beautiful misfits and welcome to the 5th in my Pixelburn E3 Blitzkriegs for 2016, this one being for the Sony conference. Although I should probably start calling these things Langsamkriegs instead, because that's German for slow war and yeah. Sony's conference took place at the venerable Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, and they certainly didn't put the grandeur of the venue to waste. Straight away we had Bear McCreary of Battlestar Galactica and Walking Dead soundtrack fame, waltzing in looking like Kylo Ren's Mirror Universe duplicate to conduct an attendant orchestra in a rousing epic musical performance. This was the dramatic prelude to the gameplay demo for God of War, a new one, taking place in the old northern wilds of Scandinavia instead of mythic Greece, although it's still got Kratos in it. I can only presume that having slain all the denizens of Mount Olympus to win the title Angriest Man in mythical Greece, Kratos is now aiming to win the title of Angriest Man in Midgard too, although he'll have some pretty stiff competition. He also seems to be aiming for the world's most emotionally distant stepfather award because Kratos now has an adopted son. I say adopted because, let's be honest here, ancient Greece wasn't exactly known for an abundance of redheads, though they weren't completely unheard of, and this boy does look a bit on the ginger side. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Far from it. Anyhow, all young Kratos here wants to do is sit in the dirt playing with his Norse mythology action figures, but Kratos Senior doesn't truck with that sort of thing, or indeed any emotions that aren't soul-burning rage. Kratos Angry Pants summons the young boy into their hut with a stern "Boy!" to tell him he's now the proud owner of his dead mother's knife. Kratos then throws a hunting bow at the kid's head and demands he hunt some dinner for him.
I am hungry. Feed us.
Anything else you want him to get for you, Kratos? Carton of Lucky Strikes, perhaps? 12-pack of cores? Christ, and people in the audience actually cheered at this. Okay, they were likely actually cheering for this being another God of War game with Kratos in it, because that wasn't completely blindingly obvious up to this point, and not because Kratos has somehow become an even bigger dick than he was in the original God of War trilogy. So anyhow, Kratos and Kratosen go off to hunt deer, with Kratos dispensing sage hunting advice like,
"Your hunt. You tell me. Slow down, boy.
And
be calm."
Be calm. Be calm. Oh, it's real fucking rich coming from you, Kratos. Eventually they catch up to the deer, but the boy cocks up his kill shot.
What are you doing? Now its guard is up. Only fire. Only fire. When I tell you to fire.
Jesus, Kratos, why do you have to be such a dick to the poor kid? I know Aristotle said redheads were of bad character, but he also insisted men have more teeth than women do. Anyway, Sir and Boy here run off after the deer, only to get ambushed by Draugr, who've had a rough few years trying to pay the bills when all the work dried up after Skyrim came out. The boy quite reasonably asks for his bow back to try and kill them. How else is he going to level up? But Mr. Kratos says,
"No! You are not ready! Stay back!"
before beating the shit out of the Draugr himself. Don't feel too bad for them though, they get extra hazard pay for it, and they'll be back on their skeletal feet just in time for the Skyrim remaster. Shortly after that, a whopping great troll appears and screams something about Valhalla before, perhaps unwisely, attacking Kratos, who punches it in the face and then throws the boy his bow, saying,
"Here's a chance. Show me you're ready."
Yes, sir! Wait, so the kid isn't ready to fight your standard rank and file Scandinavian undead, but is ready to fight a giant fucking troll? Sure, whatever. Father of the Year. Young Kratosen, eager to help, notches an arrow to his bow and fires a fucking lightning bolt? How, by the many forked tongue of Loki himself, was he not deemed ready to... Forget it. Kratos beats up the troll, gets angry, beats up the troll some more, and subdues it so the boy can get a pity kill, except Kratos hasn't completely thrashed all the love and compassion out of him yet, so he hesitates, causing the troll to make him miss and... Ooh. Oh dear. Someone's getting the belt later. Kratos finishes off the troll instead, surprisingly doesn't backhand the kid right there, then they both go off to find the deer, which they do. The boy doesn't fuck up his shot this time either. He does however hesitate when it comes to finishing off the beast with his knife, so Kratos grabs his hands and makes him kill it. Both then share a moment of silence in which Kratos tentatively reaches out to comfort the boy, only to hesitate because he's an emotionally shattered husk of a man the developers are frantically trying to pour more actual emotion and characterization into. In short, it felt somewhat like The Last of Us, if The Last of Us had a god-slaying psychopath shoehorned in as the main protagonist. Still, as much of a dick as I think Kratos is, overall I very much support the idea of violently fucking up all the world's gods. The God of War theme continued a smidgen longer, albeit in admittedly rather epic music only form, to herald the arrival of Sony's Shawn Layden on stage, like he was Thulsa Doom from Conan the Barbarian. And speaking as someone who would himself one day like to walk out onto a stage to epic stirring music like he was Thulsa Doom in Conan the Barbarian, Shawn here is living my dream. We then got a cinematic trailer for a new game from Bend's studio called Days Gone, an open world post-global pandemic affair that, like the new God of War preceding it, conveyed a palpably strong Last of Us vibe, only the main character's a former bike gang member. That was followed by a new cinematic trailer for The Last Guardian, which honestly looks even more gorgeous than in previous ones, although the cel-shaded boy here sticks out like a sore thumb against the HD textured backgrounds in a couple of shots. Besides a brief glimpse of another griffin dog-like thing with sinister glowy eyes, however, there's nothing here you won't have already seen at some point in the past 7 years. The trailer ends with a bold declaration of an October 25th, 2016 release date, which I refuse to believe until I actually see the thing running on a PS4 with my own flawed eyeballs. Then, giving the audience barely any time to catch their breath, it was straight into an extended gameplay demo for Horizon Zero Dawn. This year's demo was a somewhat less violent affair than last year's, showcasing some of the game's non-combat systems like taming robot mounts to ride about on and NPC conversations with a Mass Effect style conversation wheel. We also get a bit more of the game's overarching story, with some of the robots seen in last year's reveal shown as being actual proper wrong-uns, somehow capable of corrupting other normal giant robots like these giraffe ones here. Did I really just say normal giant robots? Crikey, imagine one of those going on a rampage and crushing a small village. Oh, the game also has proper real animals like rabbits in it, so the surviving human population don't entirely subsist on springs, coolant fluid and bits of copper. There was still plenty of robot scrapping though, demonstrating more of the various toys you get to use and... Okay, look, I can't take the piss out of this one, okay? I adore the concept, the game mechanics look to provide some interesting possibilities for tactical play, and the main character's a kick-ass redhead. What's not to like about it? Besides it being a bloody PS4 exclusive, that is. We then went straight from robots to human-looking robots with Detroit Become Human, which began with... Oh, sod this. Okay, people, let's just pause this for a moment. Right, now I'm not going to apologise for tearing through this conference at a breakneck pace, like I did for the Microsoft one, because Sony haven't given me any bloody say in the matter. Just wanted to make that clear is all. Sony, I sincerely appreciate you not wasting my time with pointless filler, but would it kill you to give me some time to digest what I've been seeing? If this conference was a full course dinner, I'd have some pretty nasty indigestion right now. Okay, carrying on. Detroit Become Human, revealed last year with your standard cinematic trailer, was back this year with what I suppose is technically, in the flimsiest definition of the word, a gameplay demonstration, or rather as much traditional gameplay as you can expect from a game by David I really wish I were making movies Cage. In a nutshell, it's set in a nearish future where android servants are part and parcel of everyday life, treated as little more than glorified tools and prone to going disastrously wrong. So far so Blade Runner. As with trailers for previous Quantic Dream titles, there's an emphasis on multiple branching paths and making your own story, except they appear to be pushing that bit even harder than usual for this one. At one point they practically throw an entire flowchart in the audience's face while screaming, "Look at all the choices!" Although going by previous Quantic Dream games, these choices will still undoubtedly funnel you down 2 or 3 critical paths dictated by David Cage's emotional vision. It looks nice though, but then Quantic Dream games usually do. Up next was something for PSVR that looked very similar to another first-person horror demo with a name that starts with P and ends with T. Not to mention Amnesia, Soma, Outlast and Condemned, to name but a scant handful. So naturally it was packed full of the usual first-person horror tropes that we all know and love, even if we have become over-familiar with them somewhat. We have scary mannequins, cryptic telephone calls, rotting food all over the place, cockroaches, people suddenly walking past doorways and TVs showing static. That last one sadly becoming less and less reliable a horror trope as more people grow up not knowing what an analogue TV is. There's even some found footage of a man in a suit with a flashlight swearing at shadows that still ends up being more spooky and entertaining than the Blair Witch Project ever was. Yeah, like that's some sort of Herculean labour. The Blair Witch Project was shite. The trailer ended on a montage of rotting dogs, erratic jump cuts, and more analogue TV static to the tune of a gothed up variation of an old American folk song about dead geese, before giving us the title reveal. A new Resident Evil? I thought this was going to be a horror game. Where's the stupid over-the-top action anime nonsense the series had become? The bike chases, the plane crashes, the explosions, the guns. Could this actually be a serious attempt at creating mood, atmosphere, tension and other things designed to invoke feelings of dread and fear in players? Sure, so I pointed out a bunch of cliched tropes it uses earlier. I only did that because I'm an incorrigible horror snob and because I care. So props to Capcom for trying to drag the series back to its horror roots. It's only been how many years now? Sony then interrupted the remorseless tide of computer-generated imagery to bring a flesh and blood Sean Layden back onto the stage, accompanied by an orchestral performance of Holst's Mars Bringer of War. And before you ask, no, I didn't cheekily dub Mars Bringer of War over that footage there. That actually happened. Maybe it's a new clause in Sean Layden's contract that he can only be summoned forth by rousing epic orchestral scores. One day, Matthew. One day. Sean was only made manifest upon the earthly plane long enough to talk about PlayStation VR, starting with the fact the entirety of Resident Evil 7 will support it. He eulogised VR in general a bit more and bragged about Sony's production expertise before dropping a PlayStation VR release date and price, which are October 13th this year and $399 Yankee dollars respectively. The price roughly equates to about €362 or, given the way our economy's going, around 10,247 British pounds. It wouldn't be a VR segment without some games of course, starting with sci-fi VR FPS type jobby Farpoint, which looks very pretty and immersive but also looks as if it might play like a rail shooter. Just a hunch. That was followed by the briefest of snippets for Star Wars Battlefront PSVR mission. Oh, it's that thing from the EA conference that I wanted to see more of, but couldn't because it would eat into precious sports game time. Alright, show me what you got. Please come back. Actually, it's probably for the best we didn't see much more of this. Every second of this footage, all 22 of them, just made me pine for a new TIE Fighter game with the same lovely visuals. After that came the voice of Mark Hamill as the Joker on top of a teaser trailer for Batman Arkham VR by Arkham series developers Rocksteady, showing Batman's iconic suit and absolutely fuck all else. So much for Mark Hamill retiring as the Joker, eh? Yeah, like anyone's complaining about that promise being broken.
Memories can be vile, repulsive little brutes. Like children, I suppose.
The last game in Sony's PSVR lineup was Final Fantasy 15, featuring Dutch DJ Afrojack. Well, featuring a remix he made of the Final Fantasy series' Immortal Chocobo theme, at least. At first, you'd be forgiven for thinking this had bugger all to do with VR, and you'd be right because this was mostly another trailer for Final Fantasy 15. It only really qualified for this segment because of this uninspired looking first-person shooter type spin-off tacked onto the end called Final Fantasy 15 VR Experience, where you teleport from point to point shooting stuff. Speaking of first-person shooting, the conference then jumped immediately into an extended gameplay segment for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, aka Call of Duty The Inevitable Foray into Space. There's really not much to say here because it's Call of Duty in space, innit? It still has guns, it still has square-jawed heroes doing square-jawed hero things, and it still has the same gung-ho glorification of the military without a smidgen of a fraction of a quantum of irony.
Gentlemen, let's get it done! Booyah!
It's also a wee bit Battlestar Galactica, although don't go telling your average Call of Duty fan that, they'll just think you're a nerd.
They're launching Scouters!
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
They're launching Scouters!
They're launching Scousers. Man, space is really cruel to people from Liverpool, isn't it? There was also a brief snippet of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare remaster, which, let's face it, is the only reason most COD fans will be buying Infinite Warfare, and that's likely the one they'll keep playing long after, leaving Infinite Warfare matchmaking lobbies looking like, well, like Pripyat.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
Shawn Layden then returned to the stage once more, only instead of rousing epic music, he was summoned forth by a jaunty little salsa number. This was to announce fully remastered, built from the ground up versions of Crash Bandicoot, Crash Bandicoot 2 and Crash Bandicoot Warped as PS4 exclusives. Crash Bandicoot is also coming to Skylanders Imaginators, due out this October, where he will no doubt soon become known to most Skylanders fans as that character Mummy or Daddy always play as when they're not hogging Spyro. After a brief bit about LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens, which I own and is fun, we were then graced by the presence of Andrew Littlefinger House, who teleported in from Westeros accompanied by an appropriately medieval fanfare, specifically to introduce Hideo Kojima as King of the Sony Conference. Kojima, first of his name, Lord of the Snatchers and the Metal Gears, was so eager to show off his new PlayStation exclusive that he completely raced ahead of these snazzy glowing floor panels. Needless to say, the crowd went mental, chanting his name like he was Nelson Mandela emerging from Robben Island prison.
Hello? Hello everyone. I'm back.
They say the best revenge is a life well lived, but that's not quite as cool as coming out onto a stage to the soundtrack from Mad Max Fury Road with a crowd of people chanting your name. Is it? Kojima then revealed the trailer for his next title, Death Stranding, starring a naked CGI Norman Reedus wearing sci-fi handcuffs lying on a volcanic beach strewn with dead sea life. Norman then picks up a baby connected to him via a cybernetic umbilical cord, only for the baby to melt into black sludge in his hands. CGI Reedus then notices he's being observed by 5 mysterious figures floating in the sky. Cue a Hideo Kojima game, title, Kojima Productions logo, Finn. And nothing I just said there does this trailer any justice whatsoever. In a conference that was running at breakneck speed through a wall of explosions, bright lights and noise, this refreshingly quiet moment stood out like an art house film in a Michael Bay marathon. For starters, it plays to Kojima's strengths as a visual director with a keen eye for scene composition, framing and symbolism, and not to his comparatively weaker skills as a writer. Taking Kojima's claim that this was rendered entirely in real time with a pinch of salt, this trailer is also impressive on a purely technical level, and the fact it was made in a mere 2.5 months is an accomplishment in and of itself. But how will the actual game play? What's the premise? Will it be any good? This trailer answers precisely none of those questions. And yeah, I'm strangely okay with that. At the risk of sounding like a pseudo-academic wanker, the trailer for Death Stranding achieves the remarkable feat of standing on its own as a self-contained creative work in and of itself, a thing of desolate beauty that I'm perfectly happy to admit I've rewatched more than a few times, picking up on new details on subsequent viewings, because rather than reeling off details about game mechanics, frame rates and other such nuts and bolts stuff, it's all about conveying a sense of mood and place instead. As for what the finished game will actually be about, your guess is as good as mine. For all we know, it could be about Norman Reedus saving his dog from giant moon spiders. In conclusion, Death Stranding is precisely the sort of mad thing I was hoping Kojima would make once he was freed from the strangling confines of the Metal Gear series. The conference may as well have ended there, but there were still a couple of bricks left to smash through before we reached the other side of this multimedia wall, like a teaser for a Spider-Man game by Resistance series creators Insomniac Games, which for some reason gives me a Batman Arkham vibe. Like that's in any way a bad thing. Eventually, Shawn Layden re-emerged, summoned once more by rousing classical music, to bring proceedings to a close.
Everyone, sometime in your life, should have the ability to walk on with an orchestra. It's the most amazing thing ever, let me tell you.
You see, even Shawn realises he's living my goddamn dream right now. Alas, Shawn wouldn't let us escape without showing us another look at something we'd already seen. That thing being a live gameplay demo for Days Gone. That video game hybrid of Sons of Anarchy and The Walking Dead we saw right after Dad of War at the start. Starting straight away with some open world biking for all of a scant handful of seconds before Biker McBikey Bloke here enters an abandoned sawmill to find someone called Two Dog.
This is 3 Dog, ow! And you're listening to Galaxy News Radio. We're Radio Free Wasteland, and we're here for you.
No, I said 2 Dog, not 3 Dog. I know it's easy to get your dogs confused in post-apocalyptic settings like this, but I doubt this particular one has a penchant for Billie Holiday. To cut a long story short, zombies happen. Lots of zombies, and runner ones at that, in big Left 4 Dead style hordes. Our intrepid hero Bikey leads them on a merry chase through the sawmill, throwing bullets and molotovs, only to find himself up the proverbial fecal creek without a suitable aquatic locomotion device. Sony then squeezed in a jam-packed sizzle reel with all the stuff we saw interspersed with stuff we didn't see, like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Battlefield 1, Yooka-Laylee, Persona 5 and South Park The Fractured But Whole, before finally letting everybody go. Phew, I think I need to lie down after all that. You certainly can't say Sony skimped on quantity with this conference. It was absolutely chock-a-block with games, one after the other, with practically zero room to breathe in between. A bit like someone punching you repeatedly in the face, and much like how the pain of repeated individual punches to the face swell into a massive, all-encompassing blob of generalised agony, the constant barrage of game after game after game became somewhat overwhelming by the end. This conference was also incredibly light on hardware stuff, with PSVR being the only blip in an otherwise 100% games lineup. As for the PS4 Neo, reportedly designed with 4K gaming in mind, while Sony had previously confirmed its existence, there was absolutely no mention of it during the event, which I found a tad surprising. Perhaps Microsoft's Project Scorpio got Sony a bit rattled, or they simply decided to play it safe and avoid even the slightest risk of upsetting their existing user base. Speaking of playing it safe, that's the impression I was left with after watching this conference. Things kicked off with a new instalment of the now ancient by gaming standards God of War franchise, and 3 of the 4 games immediately following it were ones shown at last year's Sony E3 conference. And one of those 3, The Last Guardian, made its debut 7 years ago and has spent 9 years in active development. Even Days Gone, a brand new game, seemed overly familiar by how it channeled a bit too much of The Last of Us. The first-person back-to-horror basics Resident Evil 7 was a genuine surprise and personally one of the 2 most memorable moments of the conference for me. The other was Death Stranding, of course, and not just for artsy-fartsy reasons either. Leaving Kojima's megastar status aside for a moment, for a conference that was fast, loud, jam-packed and full of glitz, the trailer for Death Stranding was something relatively quiet, subdued and contemplative, which perhaps ironically made it stand out all the more. I am not at all saying this was a bad conference or somehow inferior to, say, Microsoft's one. It was very well orchestrated, pun intended, didn't miss a beat, again, pun intended, and kept things strictly games. It just felt very safe and somewhat complacent for my tastes. Say what you will about Microsoft potentially alienating its user base with the announcement of a newish console, at least they took something approaching a risk. All in all, however, this was a very solid showing from Sony. And that's all for this episode of my E3 Blitzkrieg for 2016. If you liked it, then please do communicate that fact directly by clicking the like button down below and the subscribe button if you haven't already, and instructing your friends, acquaintances and loved ones to do the same, and contributing to my Patreon. Oh wait, I don't have one of those yet. I should probably get around to that at some point. Either that or I keep getting my medicine money the old-fashioned way. Anyway, tune in next time where I'll be taking a look at Nintendo's E3 2016 conference.